Hello everyone, and welcome to the first episode of our three-part mini-series on love and relationships. I'm Kiki Halper-Newman, a mikveh attendant and a Kabbalah teacher. I am honored that you're here, and I'm looking forward to diving deep with you today. Let's get started. Hello everybody, today's class is going to be about an hour. This class is dedicated by my dear friend Shana Chefetz for Refuah Shalema for her son Rafal Moshe Tzvi Hirsch ben Shana Chava. And thank you so much to Shirat David for partnering on this, and we love doing things with you guys. Okay, first I'll start with the story. There's a guy who saves his genie's life, and the genie says, I'll grant you one wish. What's your wish? He says, I want you to create a highway that connects my backyard and Hawaii. And the genie thinks around, he's like, come on man, that's crazy. He's like, fine, you know what? I've been married for 7 years to my wife. I cannot figure her out. One day she wants this, one day she wants this, one day she loves me, one day I'm mad. Just sit with me for an hour and explain to me how women work and why they are the way they are. And the genie goes, so did you want the highway to be 2 lanes or 7 lanes? So we're complicated. And I'm also hoping, as a background to this class, that I've heard from so many of my friends who didn't have the best Kabbalah class experience, or didn't even have Kabbalah classes, or didn't so much connect with it. And I hope that this is like completes that and gives you, some sort of hashlama or shleimut, and that you come out for this with feeling more connected to the mitzvah of Taharas Mishpacha, more empowered and inspired and reinvigorated, and that you learn something new and connect to your neshama as well. I think it's really important to share for context that everything that I'm sharing is my perspective, and while it may work for me and make me feel more connected, it may not be right for everyone. And so if you're hearing something that I'm sharing and it doesn't connect with you, or you discuss it with your husband and it's not the best thing for your relationship or your marriage, then feel free to disregard it and take what you do appreciate from this class. It's going to be a 3-part series. And so today we're going to cover Niddah and the male-female energy, hopefully, background of Niddah, a lot of the spiritual dimensions of Niddah, and then at the end we'll go through the halachic overview of Niddah, refresher, the reminder part. So it's a shiluv. This class is going to be a shiluv of hashkafa, inspiration, chassidus, Kabbalah, and the halachic reminders to refresh our memory, because we always need refreshers. The second class is going to be focused on the deep waters of the mikveh and the spirituality of that, and how connecting to our bodies and our body image as well, and healing all of that. And the third class is going to be on intimacy and Taharas Mishpacha. And there'll be overlap between all the classes as well. So about me, I've been teaching Kabbalah for about 11 years. From when I got married, I took a course in Matan with Shani Tarragon, and it changed my life. And in COVID, I became a balani, a mikveh attendant. So I really came full circle, and though they really work together and connect. And I also meet with a lot of women because I'm a Chabad shlucha and a fra. So all three just connect really well, and I, Baruch Hashem, had the opportunity to be fully involved in Taharas Mishpacha. I really want you guys to hear from you something at the end. I really want to hear what resonated with you, what you want to hear more of next time as well. So if I share something and you want to hear more about it, just write it down and tell me, and I'll try and incorporate it next time. Okay, so before I go right into because sometimes you go to a Kabbalah class and they'll just start listing all the halachos. And actually, just a few weeks ago, had a Kabbalah getting married. I'm a host of the daughter, and I said, "How was your Kabbalah class?" And she said, it was terrible. They just sat her down and spoke to her about hefsek Tara for an hour. And they asked her before, what do you want to talk about? It was a 1-hour class. So when you just sit her, and so I asked her, are you planning on keeping Taharas Mishpacha? And she was like, no, just once before I get married, and then we're probably not going to do mikvah again. So I was like, wow, really, you can't just go into the halachos. If I had that opportunity with a Kabbalah for 1 hour, I would speak more about the beauty of the mitzvah, and how to incorporate small steps in that, and how it's not an all or nothing, etc. So why am I saying that? Because in all halachos, when you just jump straight into what is the halacha, you're missing the whole point of it. It's my husband, he was teaching halachas Shabbos or halacha to a Baal Tshuva seminary called Ma'ino. And he was like, I can't just come in and being you can't do this on Shabbos, even though that's what the girls want, because you lose the whole context. So instead he came in and said, here's what you could do on Shabbos, right? And then here's what Shabbos is all about. And then within that framework, we have not a list of don'ts. Judaism and Torah is not a list of, it's not a checklist, and it should never be a checklist of a list of things you cannot do with a bunch of restrictions you can't do with your husband. Niddah and Taharas Mishpacha and all Torah mitzvahs should never be a list of do's and don'ts. It would be if you're in a relationship with somebody and they're so what's that like? We're here's a list of things I do for my for my spouse, and here's a list of things I'm not allowed to do. You're like, that's not a relationship. And with our Torah mitzvahs, often it becomes that, and it starts to feel that way, that Judaism in like halacha class is just a list of things you could do or can't do. And we really need to step back to see the bigger picture, that we're in a relationship with Hashem. And then even with, let's say, with a unique mitzvah like Shabbos. So my husband will say, well, Shabbos is this gift Hashem gave us to pause and connect with our neshama, with our family, and with Hashem. And then, and obviously explore, and then within that context, there's a list of things that we refrain from doing to enable that, to create that island, right? To create that space and time. Like if I'm on a date with somebody, we put our phones away, not because we're restricting each other, but because of what we want to encourage, and we want to encourage the closeness. So with Niddah as well, if we would come to it and just be like, here's a law, Niddah means that for 7 days, like that's how a lot of people would say it. Well, in a short nutshell, Niddah would mean that for 11 to 12 days of the month, you can't touch your husband, and you can't even pass things to each other. Like, you're missing the point completely. Niddah is a recipe, it's a formula, it's a design that Hashem built into our marriages. When He created man and woman, He created us with this beautiful design. The same way Hashem made us Shabbos, He made us Niddah. And the same way, like Shabbos, is in that framework. So I loved when my husband shared with me that that's how we teach a Shabbos now. Instead of just here's what you can't do on Shabbos and you could do, it's like here's what Shabbos is all about, and let's try and understand why each of the halachos are there in place to create this, what we're trying to create, and connect with the way we're trying to connect. And Niddah is the exact same way. So with that framework, what is Niddah trying to create? So first of all, before we get into the benefits of Niddah, Niddah is one of them. There's 3 categories of mitzvos. There's Mishpatim, which are the rational laws, and in this week's parsha, in Kiseitze, there's 74 laws, most of them which are rational laws. So they're laws that make sense. A moral person would do them on their own. Then there's Eidut, which are testimonial laws, like the culture part. Like we keep Shabbos to remind us, and we keep of the 7th day of creation. And then there's the Chukim, which are the irrational laws. They're divine. They come from God. We don't understand them. And Tuma and Tara is like the epitome of a chok. It's from God. God decided that this person, this is total, this is kosher and pure, and before it goes in the water, it's not. It looks exactly the same. I can't tell the difference, but to God, it makes a difference. And to Hashem, Tuma and Tara is something that we can't see, the human eye can't see. So it's really the epitome of the chok. In the Hanukkah story, and that was the battle of the Greeks, that to stop keeping the irrational laws. They're like, by all means, keep Shabbos, but keep it a few hours later, or keep it on Sunday if there's a game we want to go to. The irrational part of our connection to Hashem is the part that we can explain. It's why a Jew who doesn't believe in God will fast on Yom Kippur or come to shul on Yom Kippur, even though he has no relationship with Hashem whatsoever. It's a part of our relationship with Hashem we can't explain. Now, in that framework, so we don't know why God doesn't like milk, dairy, like milk in your meat. We don't know why, but so why do we keep it? Because ultimately we're in a relationship with Hashem. Hashem is infinite. Hashem created the entire world. He designed it. He's the manufacturer. So the same way when I buy a new iPhone, I'm going to follow the manufacturer's advice. I'm not going to put it in water if he says not to put it in. If they say to protect it. I don't know why the battery dies if I charge it till 100% and leave it charged overnight, but that's what it does. So I trust the manufacturer. So how much more so God, who designed the entire world? I'm going to trust that if Hashem says, I created you, and this is the best way for you to utilize your life, and you have to just trust me on it, and there's things you will not understand, and there's things I cannot explain to you, but just trust me that I made you, and I'm telling you the best way to utilize the life that I gave you, your body. So every instruction Hashem gives us in our body, we ultimately know is for our benefit, and all the mitzvahs we learn are l'tovatenu, they're only for our benefit and for our good. So on the one hand, we don't understand mikvah, and we'll speak a little more about that later. And on the other hand, we also learn that although we can't understand the ultimate reason why Hashem decided it, or under everything about it, we can know that it's for our benefit, and we can learn all of the benefits, and we can explore the deeper layers of the benefits that Hashem designed for us. So when Hashem made man and woman and said, the best way for you to be together is to first get married, be committed, live together, and then live in this real unique design, and it's not something you would have thought of if not for Hashem telling us, in God's prescription for the best marriage that you can have. It's like giving an upgrade to your marriage. Like 2 people could be married, but when we infuse Hashem's design into it, it's like an automatic upgrade. It's like upgrading your iPhone. We're upgrading it to a higher divine marriage, and we're inviting Hashem into our marriage. And we know how to invite Hashem into our home with Shabbos and with kosher. And here through Niddah, we invite Hashem into our marriage as well. And now my marriage is no longer a finite marriage between two finite human beings who are very limited and could mess up. Now I've upgraded my marriage to an infinite marriage because I have Hashem in the picture. So it's like that triangle that we really are a partnership. It's a threesome. We're all in a threesome with God in our marriage when we commit to Hashem's being a part of our relationship and being a part of our marriage. And when we have Hashem, it's like I heard someone once say, it's like a silent partner investing in you. And so like when I prepare a shiur and I it's my limited capabilities, it could go whatever. But if I invite Hashem and I say, Hashem, I don't know what I'm saying, I didn't have time to prepare, please, be with me and speak through me, then my shiur is upgraded because I have this like endless partner with endless wealth to, give me this abundance. So with our marriage as well, if I invite Hashem into my marriage and I say, and that only works if we do it by Hashem's rules. So someone's like, can I do it if I'm married to non-Jew? No, I have to be married to, it has to be under Hashem's guidelines. And then we have this silent partner of unending abundance and brachais to give us in our marriage kochos that we can't. Sometimes we're like, I don't see how this can work. It's so difficult. A marriage could be really difficult. And if anyone says their marriage is easy, they're lying. Every marriage is difficult, and even the best marriages have struggles and have ups and downs, and there's definitely not always ups. And so when we have this opportunity to have not just our finite capabilities, but something higher than us, and that's really what the chuppah was. It was like saying that you two alone, meshing like masculine and feminine energies together, yeah, of course, that's why half marriages or more don't work out. But when you have Hashem who's infinite, who can fuse two opposites together, that's what Oseh Shalom B'Im Romav means. That Hashem makes peace in the heavens. When we say what it really means is that in the heavens there's Malach, Michael, and Gavriel, fire and water, and they clash. But when Hashem is there, then they all become united. They're all in peace, and all the Malachim have sudden within the presence of Hashem. And in our marriage as well, yes, of course, it's hard to blend such different personalities and upbringings and baggage, but when you invite Hashem and you do it under the guise of a chuppah of the encompassing light of Hashem, and that's really the whole wedding ceremony is all about bringing the makif, something higher than you, enveloping you, and that's bringing you both together. And that's why really all of the wedding parts of the ceremony are all about the surrounding. So we have the chuppah that surrounds us, the bride walking around the groom, we have the ring that's a circle, and all of that to invite this higher power into our marriage. So we don't understand why. We do it anyways, even when it's hard, even when I don't feel all the benefits that I'm going to share with you, because we don't always feel these benefits. Sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't, but hopefully through today we'll learn about the benefits and how we can maximize our Niddah cycle to get the most that Hashem wants us to get from it. I don't know if you learned this in Kabbalah classes, but one of the first things that I start when I sit with my Kala is, first I talk about just their feelings about marriage, if they're looking forward to it, if they have any past trauma they want to share, if they're excited, if they have any fears about being exposed or being naked, about their body, and all that, so I can know who I'm talking to and where they come from. But then after we go through all of those things, I need to know about them and hearing from them what they, where are you planning on keeping? Where are you holding? What do you want to gain from Kabbalah classes? I ask them if they're a text-based person, they want to hear all the makoros and sources of the halachos, or do they just want to know what to do? And do they want to know the hashkafa and the spirituality around it more? And then, so every Kala has something else that she wants to hear. And some people, for a lot of Kalas, we focus mostly on the psychology and healing and what a healthy sexual relationship looks like. And how to experience sexual pleasure. But when we start talking about sexuality and intimacy, the first thing we need to frame is that a lot of times, I've found for many of my Kalas, not all, that there's because of tznius, and I'm not sure why, because tznius is such a big part of what we grew up with, there's sometimes a sense of shame around our sexuality, we have to cover up our sexuality. And then suddenly we're told to get married, and sometimes that can transfer, that sexuality is something shameful. So the first thing that I want to cover today, and I'll cover with anyone, and I've seen women who, is that our sexuality is not only not shameful, not only something we need to cover up or hide, it is the holiest, most divine part of us. And it's, being sexy is holy. Being sexy is not being holy. There's obviously tznius, sometimes it's framed the wrong way, and it's so sensitive in the way you have to frame tznius. Obviously, having sex with everyone is not holy, but having intimate relations between a husband and wife is the most divine two humans can be. So much so that when a man and woman, or husband and wife, are being intimate, the Shekhinah is there. And even though people hear that, I think sometimes a lot of married women I've spoken to still, and husbands, still like have this feeling of like only if it's done in like a very tsanua way, right? If it's like lustful or vulgar or like outrageous sex, like that's not holy. That's not true at all. Obviously, hope you know the story. I brought it for you in your sources. There's the awesome story in the Gemara, in Brachos, where the Gemara has plenty of illicit stories, but the Gemara relates that Rav Kahana, who was a student of Rav, he snuck into his bedroom because he wanted to see how his rabbi had sex. Okay, like I don't recommend this, but he did it. And he lays under the bed and he hides there and he listens and he hears, these are the words, he hears him chat, sachak, and he basically hears him having very lustful relations. And eventually he can't control himself. The teacher finds him and says, "What are you doing here? Leave. This is not okay." And he says, "You're my Rav. This is Torah, and I have to learn from you how to do this." And he didn't correct him. He's like, "Okay, but like you could have just asked. You didn't have to like be in my bedroom." I'm sure like he looked under his bed every time afterwards. But he says that he heard him having very loud, pleasurable relations. He was trying to see are we supposed to have very quiet, whispered under the covers through the hole in the tzitzit, right? And we learn from many, many sources in the Gemara, and I have an entire class that I give on this. Just trust me that there's endless sources that tell us how the more passion and fire and excitement and there is between a husband and a wife, the more shechina there is, the more sexuality is. And again, I hope this goes without saying, but sex between a husband and wife is not only for the purpose of being godlike to bring a child into the world. The more a husband and wife are intimate, even every time husband and wife are born, spiritual souls are created because it is so divine. We are replicating the divine. We are reuniting the vav and the masculine and feminine above. We are doing great stuff above, but at any time, whether or not there are kavanot of spirituality before, whether or not there is sexy talk, and whatever is used, anything used in the bedroom. So let me just be clear. So I've been approached by quite a few women in the community who will, ask me different questions about like what's okay in the bedroom, or they want to try out things and their husband is like, no, it's like really not okay, it's inappropriate. And I'm not talking about like ultra religious people at all. And I'm like shocked. I'm like, really? Like, of course, tell your husband. My answer to them is always the same. Tell your husband that the Rebbitzin told you that anything that brings a husband and wife to have more physical closeness and oneness, as long as it's consensual, is the holiest thing you can have. So if you want to be kinky and you're getting bored and you want to try out new things and you're both consent to buying kinky things, whatever it might be, handcuffs, blindfolds, sex toys, vibrators, and you think it will spice up your marriage, that box that you should hide from your children is the holiest objects that you own. They're more holy than any other objects in your house. And I'm not just making this up. Halacha backs me up. Halacha says that getting husband and wife to have more intimacy comes before a sefer Torah. So if there's a community that doesn't have enough money to buy a mikveh, they're supposed to sell their sefer Torah halachically to build a mikveh. And I didn't actually bring this for today, but their husband and wife is so important, we'll do anything for it. And Yeshua, when he had soldiers in this battle of the Shemesh Begivon, when he saw the sun, the war was over, and instead of sending the soldiers home that night, he had them sleep there and he sent them home the next morning. And the Torah says that because he delayed men from being home with their wives one night more, he did not merit to have children. And there's quite a few stories like that. And not because those men had to conceive, and not because it was mikveh night, because the Torah wants that the more oneness between a husband and wife, the better. So I'm not saying everyone has to do kinky things, but if that's going to make you have more closeness, and everyone has to recalibrate. Sometimes you'll try things out and you'll be like, oh, that didn't feel close to us, like we were good the way before, that's fine. But if you feel that you need a boost in your relationship and that you might have more closeness if there's something consensual done that doesn't cause harm to anyone, then that is the holiest thing that you can do. The holiest place and people, if I would ask you, what is the holiest place in the Jewish community? And it's not the xual, it's not the Beis Medrash, it's the bedroom. It's the master bedroom. It is called the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies. It's like the innermost chamber where the magic happens. So, and you could have anyone call me if they want me to say it to them straight to their face. It is really the more things. And what happens that is also not talked about so much is that when you start off marriage, it's so exciting, intimacy. And not that it gets boring, but there's so many hormonal changes that women go through that affect our libido, and I wish it was spoken about more. And we don't even realize, we might just think like, oh, I'm just older now, so I'm not as interested. And then, so I'll list a few things that really affect a woman's libido, which is her sexual desire or sexual interest. Hormones, obviously, so different parts of your month, different parts of your cycle will affect it. Hormones during pregnancy can affect it. One of the biggest contributors to lowering or affecting a woman's or man's libido is antidepressants or anti-anxiety, and that's one of the reasons a lot of people don't like it. So you could actually, for that, you can actually speak to your psychiatrist and ask them for medication that affects your libido less, because there's antidepressants and anti-anxieties that affect your libido more than others, a lot more than others. There's some that make it so hard for women that they can't even be touched. There's women who, when you're on certain antidepressants, like the general ones, like Lexapro, and it can cause the woman, even touch bothers her, and that can so deeply affect her marriage. So one thing she can do is speak to her provider about, her psychiatrist about switching up to a meds or combining with another meds that can help balance out the hormonal side effects. Obviously the depression itself leads to a big decrease in libido, and fatigue and exhaustion. And just a disclaimer here, because that's not what this class is about, but depression can manifest not just postpartum, but also during pregnancy. It's not as common, but it's very common because the onset or like the change, the drop or like or the radical change of hormones with anything that feels traumatic can trigger depression. So whether pregnancy starts or during birth, both of those times are times when there's big hormonal shifts. So if around that time there's anything that feels traumatic to the woman, it can trigger depression. So I think it's just good for women to know that. For me personally, I was pregnant with my first, and I had severe depression, but I didn't think it was even, I never had depression before. I just thought that I'm worthless now. And then only after my mom pointing it out to me, I was did an online test. I'm oh, I'm depressed. And it was such a relief. And I looked it up. I'm can you get depressed during pregnancy? And they're yeah, there's something called antepartum depression. I'm relieved to know that I'm not going to be like this forever. So that's just a side point. So what can you do about all these effects in libido? Obviously speaking to your psychiatrist, even if you're not taking meds, because another thing I forgot to mention is birth control. Birth control also affects, so hormonal birth controls especially, really can affect our libido. So what we can do is be aware, speak to our providers, and that's when we can introduce what I used to call sex toys, but there's a rabbi in Elazar that calls them marital aids. So I borrowed that from him, and I love it because that's we had this connotation of sex toys being as something maybe you have this kind of idea of being vulgar and used for in the pornography industry. And he's no, we use them as marital aids, and I love it. And he sells them. He's a rabbi and he sells sex toys. I love it. I've also had women where I'm you really who come to me because of their libido, and they're you can really use marital aids or vibrators or things like that to help with your because if touch is so hard for you. And they're no, I would never, my husband would never order it to my house. I'm I'll order it for you. So if anyone, I really will. I have ordered and I will order lubricant, vibrators, whatever it is that you need, I will order it, and you could say you got it from the Rebbetzin. So I'm actually working, I want the mikvah to start selling it, because I think if you, not that it should be out and display, but that you can get it at the women's mikvah because it's part of your Taharas Mishpacha. So it's one of my goals. So again, anything consensual that brings you to have more closeness and it feels right for you and it feels like it's making you more closeness is the holiest thing in your house. Okay, that was a digression because I feel that was a good just intro to the idea of how important and how celebrated our sexuality is in Judaism. So when I start with the Kabbalah, I'll first want to give her, I don't speak the this part, but I mentioned that it's more of the idea of reframing our sexuality as not something shameful to be embarrassed of, but something to celebrate and know that it's the greatest thing you can do as a human being. And so that's it really is. And our sexual and intimate life is the glue in our relationships. And if that's strong, if you go to a marriage therapist, you talk about other things, a good marriage therapist will be let's talk about your sex life, even if you didn't come in about that, because that's really the pulse where you really want to make sure that that's strong before. And if that's fixed, then even other external things can a lot of times solve themselves. Mikvah can be really, really hard sometimes. It could be a challenging mitzvah. I remember going to I was working in a seminary, a Baal Tshuva seminary, and we did this mikvah tour in Tzfat. And the Balanit there, she was a girl giving the tour, and she was really young, and she was saying how mikvah Niddah is the best thing in the world. For 2 weeks, they're best friends. They have slumber parties and they talk all night. And then on mikvah night, they come home. She was the mikvah night, they come home and then they just weep and hug each other. I'm and she was saying, and I'm can I raise my hand? I was mikvah's not that's awesome for you guys, but it's not always like that. Sometimes I just scream, I hate Niddah, this is the worst mitzvah, I never want to have Niddah again. So it's sometimes it's amazing and that's awesome for you, and some people might have that, but if anyone here doesn't experience that, that's okay also. So it's amazing if you do. And if you're doing it like perfectly, like in the design, Hashem wants it to be that way, but it's not always going to be that way. Sometimes it's just going to be a mitzvah that I'm like, Hashem, I'm doing this for you. And I hope you see, and you're like giving me a lot of schar and olam haba. No, I'm joking. Like a lot of brachos. And, but if mikvah is hard and challenging, that's actually a really good sign. That's a sign of a really healthy relationship. And that's good. So whenever a couple says, mikvah is so hard, Niddah is so hard, I'm like, that's amazing. That means that you have such a loving, strong physical bond and that you really are attracted to each other and the desire is still there. That's good. Mikvah should be hard. And I heard one of my Rebbitzins, Rivka Slanim, say that if mikvah gets easy, you should run, not walk to the marriage therapist. And it's not saying there's something wrong with you because it's very common, but that's a good, when mikvah starts to get easy, that's like your warning sign that you need to work on your relationship, on your intimacy. It's time to either read books together and really like prioritize your intimate life. And it might mean going to a marriage therapist, it might be going to a sex therapist, it might be just really making the time to prioritize talking about your sexual life, what your wants and desires are, why it's getting easy, because it shouldn't be easy. When it's like, whatever, I'm going to the mikvah, no big deal, that's a good sign. I mean, it's good because it reminds you that now you need to prioritize your intimate life. It shouldn't be that easy. It should be sad. It should be hard. You should miss each other. And you should be counting down the days. So obviously the Gemara, the design of mikvah is for the purpose of reinvigorating our marriage, because we know that when you have anything amazing and it's always available, you take it for granted. Like I had the best, most gorgeous view of the mountains. And people always ask me, they're like, do you like wake up every day and are like, I cannot believe I live here? And I'm like, I wish. Like I said, I would never stop like appreciating it, but now I don't even realize, I don't even look. So even the best relationship and the best intimate life and like such a strong couple, even if you have the same, but if it's always the same and it's always available, then it just stops being exciting. It's something you just stop paying attention to. So the brilliant design, even though again, it's a hope, and even if this is not working for you in this way, at the end of the day, it's this insane, brilliant design to make it like forbidden, so there's a few reasons why it's awesome. One is that like people, like sometimes it's sad, but like many relationships end up like not working out because someone looked outside of their marriage or cheated on their spouse, not because that person was more attractive a lot of the time, but because it was forbidden. It was someone new, it was exciting. So by making like that we're forbidden, that a husband and wife are forbidden to each other, it makes it so erotic, so exciting. It's like, it makes this newness. And the Gemara says that the point that even though it's a chok, Hashem designed this for our benefit so that every month it's like a chassan and kala running to each other again. But it's not always going to be like that, and you have to put work. So even though the Gemara is like, that's great, it's not. And especially when you have kids and life gets busy, in the beginning it might have been like running into each other's arms again, but as life gets busy, and we really have to work hard to make it be that way. Because if we just go on default, which is like whatever, I need to just like do other things, get busy, then that reunion is not the same. We really have to put in the effort to have that magical reunion. So one of my favorite benefits is this bracha. I think I brought this for you in your sources. The last source. In the source, this is the fifth or sixth bracha on Sheva Brachos. And the brachos and Sheva Brachos are from Gemara Ksubos that lists what the brachos are in the order. And the nusach is like this. Samach, I'm sure you've heard it if you've been at a wedding or Sheva Brachos. They say this under the chuppah as well, because the first set of Sheva Brachos are at the chuppah. So samach to samach, reim ahuvim, kisamechacha yitzircha began eden mikedem, baruch ata Hashem, esameach chatan v'kala. Now the words reim ahuvim are like the ultimate depiction of what we want our perfect, ideal marriage to look like. We're blessing the chassan and kala to bring great joy to these loving friends. So reim are best friends, deep friends, and ahuvim are lovers. So we give the chassan and kala the blessing, and I give this to the kalas and the chuppah, like just that you should always be best friends and lovers. There's another bracha, chassan and kala to have gila rina ditza chedva, ava achva v'shalom v'reos, right? We know that one, right? So the Chanim say that gila rina ditza and chedva are pleasure and laughter and joy, and that's talking about the few weeks of the month where a husband and wife could have physical intimacy and you're experiencing being lovers and rejoicing and laughing together, because that's what the Torah calls making love. And Ava, Achva, Shalom, and Reus are love, Achva, togetherness, Shalom, peace, and Reus, and friendship. So the other time of the month, we're supposed to strengthen those parts of our relationship. So Hashem gave us this like amazing opportunity, and this is where it gets hard, because what happens often, and I teach my colleagues this, is that it's so difficult, especially for a new couple who's like just experiencing intimacy for the first time, and there's not the distraction of kids. It's so difficult to just be around each other when you can't touch, and hopefully some of you experience this as well, that even if we have kids at home. So the being together without being in touch could be so difficult that a lot of times what happens is that the husband or the wife or both will like just be distant, not like in a rude way, but just like do their own thing, go in their own world, because it's so hard to just be together and talk. And that's where it gets difficult, because a man is wired differently. He can like turn it on like a switch and be like, when she goes to the mikvah, be right back ready for physical intimacy. But for a woman, her physical intimacy is very much dependent on her emotional, on her feelings. So it's not a switch. You can't just be like ready. She needs to be emotionally there and feel emotionally close. So what will happen a lot of times for a lot of couples is that they're like avoiding each other, kind of, without like not intentionally, but they're avoiding each other during Niddah. And then comes mikvah night, and he's like, awesome. And she's like, no, but I'm distant. I don't feel close to you. She won't like maybe say this, but that's what will happen often. And that's when Niddah is not as awesome as it could be. So what we need to do to correct that is recognize that the formula wasn't just separate. The point of separating is not to be distant. It's the opposite. It's to be close and to make sure that you're not neglecting your friendship. Because a lot of if you can touch all the time, it's so easy to smooth over an argument with just a hug or a kiss and like kiss and make up. Or just to be like, just to sweep it under the rug. But when you're forced, when you can't talk, when you can't just kiss and make up, and you're forced to talk and communicate and just really explore those other parts of the relationship, you're deepening the friendship. Because when you're dating, you're really growing this deep bond and this friendship and this foundation of friendship. And then when you're married, you become lovers, and you forget that that friendship has to keep being built. If you have a friend and you're not putting into that friendship's gonna just fizzle out. And so the friendship component of a marriage is almost as important as the lover part of your marriage. And it's really like the balance of those two. And so we have this like opportunity for like 11 to 13, 14, whatever days of the month, half the month, to really deepen our friendship with our husband, with our beloved, and to like take the opportunity and be like, yay, now that we can't just be physical all the time, now we get to deepen and strengthen the other parts component, the emotional component of our relationship and the friendship part of our relationship, to really have the same conversations that we had when you were dating. And I spoke about this in my Elul shiur, that's what Elul's about in our relationship with Hashem, and I'll briefly share it, is that we learn in Chassidut that Rosh Hashanah is Hashem's proposal to us. The night before Rosh Hashanah, us blowing the shofar is us screaming yes. And when we blow the shofar, we are accepting Hashem's proposal to remarry us every year. And Yom Kippur is the intimacy. It's that oneness in the yichud room. It's in the yechida, l'yechedcha, in the by ne'ilah, when our yechida is shining. And then Sukkot is the Shabbat brachos. And what's Elul? Elul's our dating, because you don't just remarry. So first of all, we married Hashem at Har Sinai. What's this marriage doing? Hashem's like, yeah, but we changed. So you married me then, but we've evolved and we need to re-propose every year. So Elul is our time to re-enter the relationship with Hashem, date, ask, communicate, where am I at with the relationship with you, and just have this whole time to re-enter that relationship so that when Hashem proposes to us, we can confidently say, yes, 1,000 times yes. And I love taking that mashal back into our relationship with our spouses. And I wish, I keep saying this, that we had to renew our vows every year. And we had to re-propose every year, because how different would our relationships be if we knew that renewal time is coming up, we better start dating again. And throughout the year, it's not just we come in Elul and we're like, no, we have Shabbos, we have like dates, we have like getaways with Hashem every Chag, or romantic getaways, we have Shabbos, we have so many times of connection, 3 times a day. So it's like in every marriage should have these markers, like every morning, throughout the day, a morning kiss, or if you can't kiss, like a morning, like love you, have a great day, a check-in in the middle of the day, like mincha, good night kiss, like connecting at night. And then you should have like once a week a date, like Shabbos, and then a few bigger like dates throughout the year, if you can. And then like if we have to re-propose. So even though we don't actually have to remarry each other every year, even though I think we should, because I think it would be very beneficial, I think that we should model this idea and learn from the idea of Hashem in our relationship, to bring that into our relationships. Does anyone have the time? I just want to see if I can. Okay. So I think that in our relationships, we need to incorporate this concept, and I'll explain why it's so important. I heard and I read this scientific study that says that our cells regenerate all the time. Every day we lose 500 million cells, and we regenerate them. And over the course of 7 to 10 years, our entire body is completely regenerated. So my body right now is a completely different body physically than it was 7 to 10 years ago, and yours and yours and yours. And so not just our bodies regenerate, our personalities change and grow. So it's so crazy that we rely on like the initial dating period of getting to know and engagement period of our spouse, and without realizing that we're evolving human beings. We completely evolve and change and grow. And every year I'm hopefully not the same person I was last year. And the issue is, and that's great. The issue happens when when I grow and my husband grows, or you grow and your husband grows, and you don't check in with each other and don't grow together, and then you end up growing apart. Because if you're growing, then one day what happens in so many marriages, when the marriages didn't end up, when the guy, husband or wife didn't cheat, but what happened? They say we just grew apart. We didn't know each other anymore. We grew apart. We were on different pages. We just grew distant. And that's so natural. That makes sense. That actually makes more sense than not growing apart, because if I'm growing and I'm becoming and evolving and becoming hopefully a totally new person than I was, and changing and growing and going through so much in life, and he's growing, then after a few years, we're not going to know each other anymore unless we commit to getting to know each other again. So then you'll end up being complete strangers. You might look somewhat similar, but you don't know each other at all. And that's natural and normal because we're evolving beings. And so what we need to do to prevent that is make sure that we're constantly getting to know each other, so we don't wake up and be like, who are you? And if we did wake up and say, who are you? That's okay. Now you have time to you have a whole new marriage you can have with a whole new person. How awesome. You get to remarry the same person again. So we can start from zero. And actually the experts say this, when there's been like a real fracture in a relationship, when things just feel like there's no hope, the experts recommend complete separation, like separating and then starting from zero. Like you're married and things are just like have no hope. He said they just go to separate houses and then start dating. Go out on a date and like ask the exact same questions that you did when you were initially dating. What are you looking for in a partner? What are you looking for? What are your dreams in life? What are your goals? What's your favorite color? What kind of music do you like? Where do you see yourself? What are your biggest passions? What are your biggest fears? Tell me about your childhood, because those same questions will be different. And they'll be different, because what things in your childhood that bothered you then don't bother you now, but other things do. And so much changes. You'll be shocked if you write down the answers and you do this exercise. You'll see how much changes, and that's really good. I mean, there's like on Shabbos, Sefa mentioned the 36 questions to fall in love with anyone. Yeah. Look it up. And I give it to my college sometimes to do during Niddah, because it's 36 like deep questions about like yourself and your life. And if you read doing those, you'll see that the answers change. So if you can get to know each other and re-date one another, then rather than growing apart, that's what it means, growing together. It doesn't mean you have to be in the same direction. It's because we don't have to have the same goals, but we want to know who you are. I want to know what your dreams are, what your goals in life, what has changed. How have you changed in the last year? This used to be your goal. Is this still? Of course not. Things change so much and we evolve so much. What is your new bucket list? What are your dreams for yourself? Where do you see yourself in a million years? Where do you want to live? Like, there's so much you want to know, and you can get to know this entire new person. So Niddah really, and often that doesn't get to happen because we don't really have this pause in the physical relationship to then be forced to dive into the friendship and the emotional relationship. And Niddah forces us to do that. And it's not automatic. It's not going to happen. It's not like the Torah is like, you're going to be friends and lovers. No, because usually if you don't think about it and you're not conscientious about Niddah, you'll just end up being distant and like avoiding or just being busy with other things. But you need to, what I recommend my kalas is that, first of all, let me just make a disclaimer. Intimacy should, according to the experts, should be scheduled. There should be a balance of spontaneous sex and scheduled intimacy. So scheduling intimacy is a really important part of my conversation with my colleagues and married people as well. Even people are married for many, many years. And what it looks like is like this. There are almost no couples in the world where they have the exact same sexual needs and desires. And also it changes throughout marriage. So not always does the man have more sexual needs or desires than the wife. It's always different. But there's always one that has more needs than the other one. And that one's always going to feel unloved, uncared about. And the other one's always going to feel frustrated and like smothered. And so the best solution of the experts, not mine, is to have a communication. And for each couple, and I tell my colleagues to do this, after you're married for a bit and things are not as exciting and things calm down a bit, whatever time that takes, and you start to notice the differences amongst you, because it starts off hopefully like a big fire, and then when you start to notice the differences, each of you sit down and honestly say, what's my ideal? So let's say for the husband or the wife, he or she wants sex every single day of the week, and he or she, the other one, is like, for me, once a week is fine. It's like my ideal. So they each share their ideal, and then they come to a place that's in the middle where both of them feel comfortable. And the husband's like, you know what? I can do 3 a week. And she's like, I could do 3 a week. Let's try that. And then we look at our schedules, and that's what it looks like. And it doesn't mean you're like locked in for that. forever, but it means let's try that and see how we feel. And let's try that for 2 months or a month. And then you look at your calendars and you see when is possible throughout the week. And then obviously it changes. Some weeks are going to be intense. Some weeks are going to be more. And if you go on vacation, it should be more than that. But look at your calendars. And this is just like a basic marriage tip, but it's good to like remember, even if you've heard this before, to redo it, because sometimes it's on your calendar and you forget. So to resit, put it in your calendar, have like a secret code for what it means. It could be like Dr. Phil, whatever you want to call it. I don't know, like doctor appointment. I don't know what you want to call it, but put it on your calendar literally. And then you know that day is marked off for you guys. So that's when you are allowed to be tahor. And then recalibrate and check in and be like, how's that going? And make consequences. So consequences are like, if we don't end up doing it, the one who wants to have less intimacy commits to 2 times a week, and then they back out or whatever, you can make like small consequences, like you'd have to do the dishes or laundry, make your bed, like something small like that you agree to in advance to make you have more motivation to do it. Or it could be like that they end up doing what they like to do on their time. You know what I mean? It's like, you have to do this with me then, or like watch the show that you hate with me. You know what I mean? It could be something cute and fun, but then it puts an element of like fun into it and like a consequence, so you're more committed to it, and it's not like nothing will happen, and like keep score. So that's really how. And then obviously spontaneity on top of that is amazing. If you want to have spontaneous intimacy, even better. But that's just the base, and then everything after that is the dessert.
How do you do that with little kids and shifting and babies who wake up? And
so it's going to change throughout your life. So when you have a newborn, the intimacy might be, let's make sure to have it once a week, right? Let's just make sure that we carve it. And intimacy doesn't have to mean orgasm. Intimacy doesn't mean that it's like we only get the check if we orgasm. It could be that we cuddled with we had skin to skin touch. That is like, because that already releases all of the good feelings that we need, all the good hormones like oxytocin, dopamine, and serotonin, even with just skin to skin touch. So it doesn't have to have sex. It has to be intimacy. So skin to skin touch, cuddling, you fell asleep, you still get the check. Right? If that happens for like 3 months, then obviously you should make sure that you also, if one's partner needs their sexual desire still, then you should talk about that. But you don't only get the check if orgasm or sex happened. It's that the feel-good hormones, the bonding, the touch that you wouldn't have with someone who wasn't your spouse is there. That you're cuddling, you're spending that time just connecting, making out. You make out, you have skin to skin, that's good. I think to me, that's like intimacy as well. As long as both parties are happy. If one spouse is saying, no, I actually need to have sex, then obviously try to make that happen. Now, taking that into the context of Niddah, I tell my kallas, this is just the background, I tell my kallas that the same way that scheduling intimacy is so important, if you have 2 times a week, no matter what, or 1 time a week, no matter what, because depending on different parts of your life, 1 time a week might be a huge stretch for you. And depending on other parts of your life, it might be like, what? That's a little. There is no like right or wrong. And like for any couple, it's whatever you both feel like you are getting, at least what you need to not feel like you're like lacking or missing or sad or resentful, right? So there's no like, if other couples have it this much, there is no one true answer. But the way I translate that into Niddah is that the same way that you would have, let's say 1 time a week or 2 times a week or 3 times a week of intimacy, then when you're Niddah, to keep that calendar and have emotional intimacy. So you schedule, if you block off an hour or 2 hours or half an hour, whatever it is, for physical intimacy, so you block off an hour of emotional intimacy. And that means friendship, doing anything. And I love to give my I call it Niddah Buster, like a list. You create your own Niddah Buster. So you sit down, you write Niddah Buster, because Niddah, like to bust the pain and frustration of Niddah. And you can call it whatever you want. It could be a jar, it could just be a list on your phone, like a note on your phone, where you write a list of activities that you can do during emotional intimacy time. It can't be watching something, it can't be on your devices, anything that's not on a device. So it could be asking each other a list of questions, which is very bonding, looking at pictures together, making a scrapbook, cooking something together, having a conversation about like your theories on life, learning something together, anything that brings you close, that you both enjoy, going on a walk together, really anything. And you make a list, and I think it's cute and I like it when the couples take turns like having to plan it. So it's like Monday you plan it, like every Monday you plan it. And that way there's like, not just like, hey, what are we doing? So it's like, no, I planned it for us. For our emotional intimacy tonight, this is what I planned. Now, obviously, you're not always gonna be doing every single time of the thing, but if you do block out the same way you have physical intimacy for emotional intimacy, then you have a much bigger chance of strengthening that friendship during the times that you're Niddah. And then the Niddah is much closer to that ideal image. And everything is like, there's the ideal, and we try to get as close to it as possible. And like, I remember hearing Rabbi Manis Friedman years ago, before I was even married, describing like intimacy as like sexual intimacy as like being completely one and becoming like one soul and like having nothing between the two of you, and you're like completely united. And I'm like, is it really like that every time? And is it like bad if it's not? Because like he was being so idealistic. I'm like, this is not like, you shouldn't be saying this. What if people don't experience this every time? They're gonna feel bad. I remember speaking to my mentor Rifki at the time, where I was like framing it as like, there's an ideal perfect, and we're trying every time to reach something as close as we can to that. And sometimes there's just going to be physical intimacy, and that's amazing also. And you're hoping that there's also times when you have emotional oneness and you're feeling like a connection of body, mind, and soul and everything. But not every time are you going to reach the perfect everything. And perfection is definitely the enemy of done. So it's much better to have intimacy than to try to have the perfect one. And in our Niddah as well, we want to get as close as we can to like having like the perfect world would be like that girl at the mikvah described. Like, I'm not saying that it's not a perfect ideal. I just wanted people to know that it's not always like that in real life. And even if it's not, we still do it because we trust that Hashem knows what's best for us, and we'll get the blessings of the third of Hashem in our relationship and the infinity in our marriage through doing it, even when we don't feel the benefits in an outright and revealed way. Okay, so that was friend and lover. Remarrying your spouse, that was right. That was remarrying your spouse every year through bonding, and you don't need to have Niddah. Not always we have Niddah in our marriage. We bring this into even when you're not Niddah, to making sure to set aside times to build your friendship and date each other again and re-ask those questions to like re-get to know each other as well. Okay, any questions before we move on?
Or more of a complaint.
I love kvetching.
Right?
Yeah.
I just get like I think it's unfair, and I get very frustrated when it comes to like being premenstrual and menstrual.
Right.
That's the time I need to be hugged the most.
I totally feel you. I know, Mahaz and I always say there should be a 1 hug a day rule.
Yeah.
Totally. We always say that. We're like, we need a 1 hug a day rule. And you know what? First of all, again, I really have to say that that's so special that you like, that it's hard, that it's difficult, because it's like, that's beautiful. And what's really nice that I just did like, I've been learning a lot about the female hormones as well, which we'll maybe do in another class. But the reason we feel like we need a hug, it's because in the week or 5 days leading up to our period, the 2 main female hormones that keep us going and positive and strong and like upbeat come crashing down. Like the moon that like is full, and sometimes the moon is not full and the moon needs to retreat and recharge. So the progesterone and estrogen completely come crashing down. So the good thing is that it ends, the hormones climb back up starting from day 1 of your period. So really the big emotional crash happens the week before your period, and from day 1, your hormones, your estrogen and progesterone start climbing back up. Okay, so the actual laws of Niddah. In the context of one of the other benefits is that our like the things that you would normally just not even realize how special they are become so special when you can't do them, like holding hands or just passing something to each other. So a woman once said to someone like, I don't feel anything when I pass. And Rabbi is like, the Torah says that you can and you should be able to feel something when you pass something to each other. Well, the reason you don't pass is because you might accidentally touch each other. But every tiny touch, when you're actually keeping the full laws of mikvah and the full laws of Niddah, should be so erotic and exciting and like give you chills because you're so the problem is that we become so desensitized. Whenever you have a lot of exposure to something, you become desensitized to it, and it's not exciting. It doesn't give the same excitement as you got in the beginning. But when you abstain from it for 2 weeks or a long time, then suddenly every touch becomes so sensual and erotic, and we can gain that sensuality of even the smallest touch. Even just your hands touching each other lightly can hopefully give you chills and make you feel the sense of pleasure. And the sleeping in the same bed, like that's one of the things that, like, it's sad because a lot of couples who always sleep in the same bed, they start to not even be aroused at all. But sleeping in the same bed with your spouse should make you aroused. And when you're always sleeping in the same bed, you're going to naturally become desensitized. So one of the other benefits is that by separating, you realize how passionate those things should be and could be. For example, eating together. Eating together is like the first romantic things people do together on dates. It's like the most, having a dinner together, having a romantic dinner. I always think about like Shabbos, like Hashem telling us to light candles on Shabbos as like a romantic dinner with Hashem. And so a romantic dinner should make you want to be close and want to lead one thing to the next. And so by taking those away, it makes us appreciate how erotic and sensual those things could and should be in our marriage. And one more background to Niddah is that the more you put into Niddah, now not everyone, Niddah is not an all or nothing, but from my experience of speaking to a lot of women and working in the mikvah, what I've realized is that the more strict you are and the more you put into the Niddah and the more, like the words of the Rebbe and all that, the more you put into being like not being close when you should be close, the more close you will be when it's time to be close. So the more the passion, the build-up, the separation, the longing, and that desire build-up will be. So like, yes, like you're not going to hell if, you don't keep everything, but when you do really, like, so I remember speaking to someone who just started keeping Niddah, I don't want to share too many details, but anyways, her husband wasn't that excited when she came home, and she was like shocked. She was expecting him to like stop everything he's doing, and I was like, why wouldn't he stop everything he's doing? He just continued working, and I was like so devastated. I'm like, wait, are you keeping everything? She's like, no, we're still touching and everything, and I'm like, oh, not that I didn't say that to her, and I was like, oh, that makes sense. Like, if you're not touching at all, and you could finally touch, of course he's going to drop everything and run to you. But there's a lot of other components to it. It wasn't obviously like, it's not in formula like that. But what I have found is that a lot of times when the women are telling me they're coming to the mikveh late, or it's not as important, they're like, oh yeah, I'm just going now because we're like going out of town. Then the women will also share with me that they're not fully keeping, like, they'll be like, yeah, we don't keep everything. So the reason I'm saying is that for you, just to know that you'll get so much more of that passion that you want to hopefully have, and that longing and that desire and that eroticism and that reunion and that closeness and passion during Tara, if you're really, really careful, the more boundaries you put up during Niddah to enable that closeness afterwards. So here's the levels of halacha. Yeah.
So I just have a question about that. Like,
sure.
So, halachically speaking, like you can do things to like not always get your period and then like be together more.
Yeah.
But like I guess
that's great. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
But then like is hashkafically, like based on what you're saying? Like,
no, hashkafically it's only a problem.
idea.
No, it's totally fine. Only a problem if you're actually usher in the spiritual state of Niddah. It's not like the more distant. The formula is not the more distant you are, the more close you'll be at all. Because what about when you're pregnant? Hashem changes it. The formula is that when Hashem decided that you're spiritually tameh, then during that time, Hashem designed it in a way that if you're close during that time, the Rebbe always said this, and I heard this from a very young age, that when you're close, when you're not supposed to be close, you're not going to be close when you're meant to be close. He said this to engaged couples, which is why the Rebbe pushed for very short engagements, because engagements are very hard for young people who just want to touch and everything and do everything quickly. So the Rebbe always said this about engagement and about Niddah. So when you don't need to be Niddah, you don't need to make sure you need Niddah. When you're done with it, Hashem finds other ways to make you close. But I don't think that it has any spiritual ramifications. Okay, so here is the laws from their sources. I'm not going to do the sources with you because that would be hours, but I'll give you a little bit of where we get if you guys are interested, tell me, and next week I could do the sources of why, like the involvement of from the Torah of waiting 7 days to why we wait 7 days plus 5 days now is really interesting. You guys interested? Okay, fine, I'll do it. Okay, so in the source for why we don't sleep with women, why women, the whole Niddah thing is here. Vayikra, the first source, Yud Ches, Perek Yud Ches, Pasuk Yutes, Vel Isha benidas tumasa lo tikra legalos ervasa. To a woman during her Niddah, Tuma, which is God decided, lo tikrav. Not only should you not get legalos ervasa from the word lo tikrav, you should not come close. From there, we learn that not only is sleeping with a woman Deoraisa, but also things that whatever the Chachamim decided the Torah meant by lo tikrav, coming close to sleeping with her, which the Chachamim came to include touching in an intimate way, intimate touch. Intimate touch that you wouldn't do with someone who's not your spouse. So making out, touching under clothing, etc., is all actually Deoraisa. Sadly. Deoraisa. And why is it treated so strictly? Because 2 prakim later, the Torah tells us the punishment for Isha Shayishka, that's Isha Dava, the Gila Esarvasa, if a man lies with a woman during her menstruation and uncovers her nakedness, as Makora Ha'ara, Vehi Giltat Makor Damev, and Nichursu Shnehem, Mikarav, both of them get kares, which is only given for like purposely eating on Yom Kippur, purposely eating chametz on Pesach, like very extreme things. So it's such an extreme, their soul gets cut off from the Jewish nation. It's so extreme that the Torah is like, we really have to guard this from happening because it is so extreme and so halachically from the Torah, not only is sexual relations usher for during a woman's Niddah cycle and until she goes to the mikveh, but also equally, but also any intimate touch that is done between a husband and wife. Then the Chachamim added to that. There is a machlokas between, but the consensus is that the Chachamim added to that all touch, and sleeping in the same bed is rabbinic. Okay, that was the next step of the halachos. So, and then here's where the harchakos come in. The harchakos are also midurabanan. They're not customs. The only one that is a custom is sharing a swing or sitting on a moving object together. That's Ashkenaz custom. Everything else is halacha. So we treat them all the same. However, there are a little bit in the context of halachos. Some background is that At the end of the day, we keep halachos exactly the same, whether or not they're from the Torah or from the Rabbanan, because we have a mitzvah from the Torah to keep the laws of the Rabbanan. However, the only difference, the main time the difference would actually matter is that there's for example, in Safek, when there's a Safek means when there's a doubt. So the halacha actually is different. When there's a doubt about something that's Deoraisa, the law goes as follows: Safek Deoraisa lechumra, which means that we are always machmir. If there's a Safek or a doubt about something Deoraisa, you're machmir with it because you could be over on a Deoraisa. But a Safek Deorabanan, when it's a Safek within Deorabanan, we're more makil. So when we have a Safek about whether something is red or not, or whether something is blood, if it's Deoraisa, which we'll learn next class about how we know something's a blood that's Deoraisa or blood that's Deorabanan, then they're always machmir, which is why abadika, just trust me on this one, abadika is Deoraisa. There's a very interesting reason why, but therefore even the tiniest bit of blood makes her tameh, because it's a suffix of Deoraisa. But when there's an underwear, which is Derabanan, which is the stains, which are Derabanan, and there could be a big blood stain, and you have any suffix. If you can bring the Rav any suffix, like a suffix means a doubt, like maybe it's not my period, I waxed, you can say you waxed. In the olden days, they would say I walked by the butcher. Literally, and then the rabbi would be like, oh, you walked by the butcher yesterday? That's what it is, bye. Because if you have a suffix, it's Derabanan, we're makil, we're lenient. But if it was a Deoraisa, a bdika, there's no suffix that can make it not, because you're over on a suffix Deoraisa. So it is treated more stringently in cases of a suffix. So that's just the background of a suffix. So nowadays, if you say you ate beets, if you tell a good rabbi that you ate beets and he sees a stain, that's fine. It's enough for him to say you're not Niddah on a stain, because it's a suffix Derabanan. If you had beet juice, that's why you should always drink beet juice. Cranberry juice, wax, what? If you could find any somewhat viable. You know that famous story in the Gemara where the woman came in with blood and the Rabbi Akiva was there with his students and she somehow brought him her bloody underwear and he was like, did you have a makkah? She said, no. Did you have a makkah that closed? No. A wound, a makkah means a wound. Did you, no. But then she said, but you walked by the butcher, I think? And he said, yes. And he's like, so you're fine. That was like that classic story. So because it's Derabanan, we're makel. Anyways, all that to be saying, halacha we keep anyways, whether or not it's Deoraisa or Derabanan, but there are leniencies sometimes in the Shas Tzchak. So there's right that the Chachamim decide to make the harchakais. After touching and sharing a bed, we have the harchakais. Now, those are like the five senses. I like to think about them to resensitize our sensuality between us and our spouse. So taste. When we eat with our spouse, we're not even allowed to share a table together. If you want to share a table, you have to have something on the table that's not usually there. That's called a heker, to remind you that you shouldn't have any funny business. You also can't share a plate, you can't share the same bag of chips, and you can't drink from the same glass of wine. You can't serve each other food. A wife can't serve her husband wine or even food. So you can't serve one another. You could, if you want to make your husband a plate, you can put it near him but not in front of him. Leftover thing is really interesting. Leftovers can be eaten if you move it onto another plate first, or if someone ate in between you and your spouse, or if you're eating it when the other person is not there. So a wife could eat her husband's leftovers if he doesn't see her eating the leftovers. So that's the eating part. Then comes the smelling part. A husband can't intentionally smell clothing with smell his wife's clothing or his perfume or her perfume. The voice, she's not supposed to sing in front of him, and they're not supposed to talk dirty to each other or sexually to each other. Anything that will elicit anything sexual between them. What else are the other chumras? Throwing things to each other, passing things to each other, are the touch, the next level of chumras of touch between each other, making sure there's more space between the beds. I'm sure I skipped a few and I'll tell you. Going on vacation together. If you have to go for like a wedding, it's okay, but like you're not scheduling a romantic vacation together. You can actually go on like secluded walks, which is, I'll go through them to make sure I didn't miss anything. Now, the reason the Chachamim added is really interesting. Okay, here's why. So there's more restrictions between a husband and wife than between the same wife and husband with other forbidden relationships to them. Right? There's a list of people that you can't have forbidden relationships, and with them you could pass to them, and you could even sit next to them touching on the bus, and all the other things, but anything beyond the main
Now, why
things.
did all these
and so
halakhas
why
come?
did the Chachamim made more restrictions between husband and wife? And here's why. Any other forbidden relationship in the Torah was also given the additional law of yichud. You can't be alone with them, which is really amazing. It's one of the most amazing laws. As like a married person, I realized how mufrach in Hebrew we say. It's much more mufrach for like a Jewish married person who follows yichud to have the opportunity to be unfaithful. Because if they're never alone with a woman and they're never like alone without their wife knowing, then it's much harder to be unfaithful. The blinds are so much closer when there's a man and woman always together alone and no one knows they're there and the door is locked. It just makes it like more accessible it just makes it easier. So a lot of so anyways, I thought that was just my 5 point, can ignore that. But the idea is that in any forbidden relationship, there's a laws of yichud to protect us, to make sure that, to safeguard that, so that because if you're alone together and you're a man and woman, you're a healthy man and woman, things could happen. But for a husband and wife, they're going to do the same thing. They're going to say that when a husband and wife are Niddah, they can't sleep together, like an olden day red tent kind of thing. The Chachamim were going to say, okay, so you can't be in yichud together because things will happen. And then they were like, no, that's crazy. Like, we can't have it's impractical. It's not practical. And we also want them to be good friends. How are they going to be good friends during that time if they're never allowed to be alone together? So they're like, okay, scratch that. We can't make them be in yichud. But because it is such a serious offense because of a kares, and they're going to be allowed to be in the room with the door locked together with no one else around, we're going to put extra safeguards that we don't put for the other forbidden relationships to make more steps between them messing up. And so falling into that trap. So that is where all the harchakos come in, to put extra fences around our relationship, around that boundary, so that we're more steps away from messing up. So about sight, I said there's 5 senses. Sight, a husband's not allowed to look at places on his wife's body that are normally covered. So he's not allowed, he can look, he can't intentionally gaze at her body. He can look at her, he can enjoy her beauty. He just can't gaze at parts of her body that he's not supposed to look at, which are, the parts that are usually covered. If a husband and wife are sick, they can take care of each other. They can do anything they need to do to take care of the person, and even including touching them. It's actually more lenient when the husband is sick, because his desires are maybe stronger generally, so he's less likely to do something if he's sick, so she's allowed to help him more. And when she's sick, if there's no one, and this is only if no one else is around to help, and they need you to help them, pass them something, you can pass them something or lift them up or do whatever you need to do to take care of them if no one else is available to do it. But with her, it's much more if no one is there. I think that I covered all the harchakos. Any questions about them? The ones that I looked up that were custom were sharing a seat that moves. So you're supposed to, only if there's separate pillows.
Right. But it doesn't move.
But if you are sitting on a couch or something that only has one bench, then you just put something in between you. Which, if you're sitting on an airplane and you have to sit near each other, it's better not to. You put a bag or something in between you, or in a moving car or something, so you don't end up falling on each other. Which, if you can't go away on a vacation together, on a romantic vacation, just the two of you. But if you're going to a family simcha, you can go to the simcha.
Work trip.
Yeah. You just don't.
If it's already scheduled, and oops, I made that.
Right.
That you don't need to cancel.
You don't have. Yeah. I'm sure there's ways around it. I'm sure there's things you can do about it. Okay, I think we're going to end up here. Now, I really said I'm going to talk about the masculine, feminine energy. So I'll leave you off with just the source of it, and then it gets super crazy and deep. The source of it, one of the many sources of the masculine, female energy, is the Ish and Isha, the names of our creation. How we're created is names are almost identical. And we learn that when there's a man and woman together, we each have the Eish, the fire, and the man has the Yud, and the woman has the Hey. Because in Eish, there's the Eish plus the Yud, and together they make Hashem's name. So when man and woman come together with Hashem, then we have a fire of oneness and a fire of passion. And when we come together without the Hashem, it's the fire of destruction. And that's really intimacy. Intimacy can be the most passionate, beautiful. Fire can be something beautiful and brings passion and warmth and food and cooking, and it can also bring chaos and destruction and intimacy as well. So we want to channel that towards Hashem. But then it gets really cool about the Yud and the Hey. I'll leave off with one story, that the Yud in Kabbalah is Chachma, which is potential. So really this that class is men are from Chachma, the masculine is from Chachma, and the feminine is from Bina. And so the Yud is the potential, is really the source, the potential, and every letter begins with the Yud. When a Sofer writes every letter, he first starts with the Yud. Aleph, Beis, every letter has a Yud. So the Yud is really the start and the potential, and the Hey is the expansion. And that's what Bina is. Bina is the expansion of Chachma. So Chachma is that flash, the idea, the inspiration, the potential, and physically as well. The masculine is the potential when creating a human being. A child, the man takes the potential, the seed, and then the woman expands on it and brings it to its breadth, width, depth, breadth, and length, and expounds on it, and then develops it into a child. And that's really one of the sources of the feminine and masculine energy, and how we balance each other out. We need both. We need that potential, and we need to bring it out and into its fruition. So the Hey takes the Yud, that's just a dot, and expands it right in all directions, and the other leg is the depth, and brings it to its depth. And so the story goes that someone came to the third Rabbi, the Tzemach Tzedek, and complained that his wife is stingy, and doesn't like to have guests, and doesn't like to give tzedakah. And he said that Ish ve'isha Shechina Shrei B'neihem. If there's man and woman that are together, the Shechina is amongst them, the Yud and Hey. And he said that the Isha is the Yud and the woman is the Hey, which means that whatever she's doing is just expounding on your potential. So if she's acting like the Niddah, it started in you, and she's just expounding on that potential that started in you. So if you go inwards and fix yourself and work on yourself, then it will solve itself. You don't need to worry about what she's doing. You need to work on you, and she expounds on whatever you're bringing in potential. She's expanding that into bringing it into actuality. And that's really, like they say, the man in the olden days, the man would bring home the bread or the flour, and the woman would the flour, and she would turn it into a loaf of bread. So he would bring that potential, and she would develop it into something concrete, into something whole. Take the house and make it into a home. So that's that female energy. Obviously, we're now in a time where the female and masculine energy are shifting, but we'll speak more about that because it's really wild, the whole masculine and feminine creation of Adam and Eve and the androgynous. But when we speak about masculine and feminine, we're speaking about the women primarily connect with our feminine energy, and men also have that feminine energy in them, but it's in a way, I wasn't going to share this today, but it's in a way of achor. And maybe I'll repeat this next time, but I heard this crazy idea of how it says that when Hashem, I think that Hashem created man panim v'achor. Later on it presents that Hashem made man and woman panim v'achor. If you could find it in the sources I brought for you. And then Hashem divided them, right? So in the second account of man, it says Hashem made an androgynous human being back and forward, and he separated them. What's really cool is that when it said Lo tov yos adam levado, at that point, he wasn't alone. He was masculine and feminine, but he was feeling like disconnected from his own, let's say, feminine self. And so what panim and achar really mean, or zachar really means, is that the zachar really could also mean in Hebrew that zachar, what he remembers. So what he's conscious, so he has in both masculine and feminine in him, and everyone does. We all have the masculine and feminine. We're made up of both. But what was panim for him was the zachar. What was first and foremost pnimius for him, what he internalized and connected with, was his masculinity. And what was achar, which means acher, what he felt like was outside of him. Acher, which means like other than him. He felt like Chava was his other was his femininity. So he had the femininity, but he was other to him. And for Chava, the same as well. We have both, but what is pnimius to us is our nikibus, is our femininity, what we tap into more, which is a lot to discuss. And what's more distant from us is our masculinity, or that potential, the abstract, the being more abstract, being more distant, being more outward growth oriented. And what we do for one another is completely complete one another, because only with the Yud and the Hey we have Hashem. So only when the husband and wife unite as one and reunite as in this union do we each complete each other. So we as women, what we can focus on, so the same way the man has to focus on what he needs to work on, it doesn't have to bring his wife and complain about his wife, and he needs to just fix it in himself. What we can focus on as women is knowing that we have the capacity in the marriage to, if we want our husband's potential to be actualized, we actually have that capacity to draw from his potential and reach our more potential and that part of us as well, but also to bring his potential back down and to expound on that and bring it out, so that his potential is not just dormant, it doesn't remain in potential, but to bring, like they say, behind every successful man is a woman. And in Kabbalah it really stands that he may have had all this amazing potential, but he really does need that woman or that feminine to draw out, might be his mom sometimes, but to bring out and to schlep out that potential, to make it concrete and to make him bring that out into the world and into all its full potential in an actual way. So that's just a little bit about the masculine and feminine. There's way more to share. Thank you so much for joining. I really hope you took something from it, and I want to leave it open to questions. If you like this episode, leave a comment. It means so much to me, and share it with your friends. Stay tuned for episode 2 of this series, dropping this Wednesday on Deep Waters. See you there.